Well, folks, thanks for tuning in. Hope you had a good break over the Christmas and Boxing Day, and we wish a Merry Christmas to all of those who celebrate Christmas. A Happy Hanukkah. We trust went well for our Jewish friends, and to those of you who are atheists, we hope you found some meaning anyway over the holidays. And I hope you also found that we've been living, I think, thanks to the help of a lot of people, living up to our wish to bring you the news, what is seen behind the scenes from day-to-day Stockwell Day news, saving you time looking at the main items of the day around the world, but also giving you insights so that when you engage with friends, family, or foes, you can have kind of a lead on some of the leading stories. And we've seen that happen throughout the year. Many of our predictions coming true on the economic items, on the culture items, and the political items. So thanks for all the input people have been giving me all that. Thanks for my friends and contacts within the various governing bodies and parliaments around the world, and some of the security agencies. Thanks for keeping me posted, giving me little heads up that I can pass on to our viewers and listeners. And looking right now in terms of what we really see for the year ahead, in just some broad ways, I don't see some real breakthroughs, though I'd like to, in the area of freedom of speech, in the area of freedom of expression. Even more importantly, I continue to see mainstream media and academe winning the day as they have such a hold on public opinion because of their broad influence and because of the funding they get from governments. And let's just take a case in point of something that's just happened. We'll use this as a metaphor of much as what happens when culturally Marxist media get a hold of an item. It was just announced recently that a professor from Langara College in British Columbia, Canada, this professor just got reinstated and with all back pay fully in place. It was all arising from her, and her name is Dr. Natalie Knight, and the whole situation arose just days after October 7th, the vicious attack of onto Jewish people in Israel by Hamas, the biggest mass killing, torture, and kidnappings since World War II and since the Holocaust. And it was Dr. Natalie Knight at that time made comments about what a brilliant, and that was her words, brilliant attack this was that Hamas had done and how amazing it was. She was sort of rebuked for saying that, and Langara College said they were going to take a look and maybe discipline her. And right after that, she attended a huge rally in British Columbia less than 2 weeks later, and there she was saying the solution to the Israel problem is the revolution, the infantile revolution. Now those are very strong words because it is talking about revolution. It is talking about the battle cry of Hamas, Palestinians, which is to rid the Middle East of Israel from the river to the sea. And as we know, we repeat again, Hamas's charter always has been and has never changed, is to kill Jews all the time, everywhere. And so when someone is shouting revolution, intifada revolution, that's what they're calling for. And here was this professor doing that right after being rebuked by her own college for saying such horrific things right after the massive slaughter of Jews on October 7th. So along with that, one of the ministers in the NDP government of Premier Bibi, so this is a socialist minister, actually took offense to what the professor had said. The minister then went and met with Langara College officials and said how horrific this was. It was just following that there was a suspension. Now she was after that, Natalie Knight was reinstated, and then the case went back and forth, and then just this November, full reinstatement and full amount of pay all the way back. Contrast that to Minister Selina Robinson, who raised the issue of a concern, and in one of her speeches, she was saying and used as I often do actually in presentations when I'm doing on the history of Israel, and I talk about Moses, where he stood up on Mount Nebo before the children of Israel, the Hebrew people, went into the promised land. and he looked at the land that had been promised to him by God, and actually that land that had been promised by Abraham, really, we're talking about desert, we're talking about mountains, we're talking about very little vegetation. Now, the promise was that Israel would bloom like a rose in the desert as it has. But in those days, it was a pretty grim-looking piece of territory, and the minister of advanced education or post-secondary education made a comment that really the entire world fighting over this crappy little piece of land. Of course, she was referring to the terrain, not the people. And Premier Bibi jumped all over that, the NDP socialist premier, and used that phrase to boot her out of cabinet. Booted Minister Selena Robinson out of cabinet just for stating the obvious, and she was by no means demeaning the Jewish people. She was, as a matter of fact, praising them for being able to carve such a wonderful miracle out of that land. Anyway, she not only got punted out of cabinet, she later left government. She was not welcome there. And just using that story as a bit of a metaphor, how the person who came out praising the slaughter, calling it amazing and brilliant, and calling for revolution, is reinstated and full pay and all the payback, whereas the colleague, Minister Robinson, even though she had the backing of B'nai B'rith on the comments that she made, she loses out. Amazing. And I use that. That's one of many stories that I use to say I have my doubts whether we're going to see a healthy restoration of the ability to freely discuss and freely have full and free freedom of expression. The another trend we're going to be seeing, and I believe this is a good thing, we're going to see governments at all levels, municipal, provincial, state, and national and federal, really start to clamp down on the billions of dollars that is spent, especially through their social programs. And the pointy end of the spear, if we want to call it on this one, is what is broken out in Minnesota, in the state of Minnesota. You've been hearing lots about it at first when the accusations of fraud in the billions of dollars coming out of Minnesota, and money even going back to, talking about Somalia, going back to countries that are in pretty nasty opposition to the freedom of the West. And it's turned out at first when Ilhan Omar, who's the federal representative in the area of Minnesota, when she and others and Governor Waltz there began to be accused of overseeing or not clamping down on this massive fraud. Anybody who raised that as an issue was called racist, and we say they were doing it for political purposes. But as more and more investigation has come to play, we're now seeing what may be one of the biggest frauds in the history of the United States in terms of money that got diluted, social programs that weren't actually even delivering money, resulting in something else called fraud tourism, where people were coming to the state. They would set up, let's say, a false agency where they were going to purport to feed poor people, and it wound up that none of the money would go to the poor people. It just went to make the players in the program richer. Anyway, gigantic fraud. It's going to shake the very roots, certainly, of the political scene in Minnesota, and it's already sweeping across the United States, where people at all levels are saying, and the politicians are saying, you know what, we have to have third-party tough audits on everything. We can't just believe the administrators. So watch for that. Watch for a revamping and higher levels of scrutiny for the billions of dollars that are taken from social programs, really then resulting in the people who are really in need being starved to death. So quite rightly, this should be taking place. Well, another bit of, again, to use what I think is you're going to continue to see a complete hypocritical approach at the international level when it comes to decisions, political decisions. And here I would call this the hypocrisy of the day, if not the hypocrisy of the year. So you may or may not be aware that Somalia split as a country back in 1991, and Somaliland was the split off. Now, Somaliland has emerged as a fairly stable democracy. I say fairly, it's not perfect, but they do have regular elections. They have much greater recognition of the rights of women. than Somalia, which they split away from. They do not have the revolution that's going on and has been in Somalia for years. They don't have the vicious terrorist group Al-Shabaab, which they say that the Somali government governs by day, but Al-Shabaab governs by night in Somalia. They don't have the corruption. They're far more peaceful. And yet they have never been, since 1981, recognized as a nation by the United Nations. And the first country to do so just in the last couple of days, just in the last day or two, is, of course, the country of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, recognizing Somalia, first country in the world to do that. Now, that's going to bring some interesting, let's say, pressure to bear, because here you have Israel recognizing the part of Somalia, it used to be Somalia, that is far more democratic and far more respectful of human rights and is not an exporter of terrorism as Somalia is. And yet the United Nations saying this is a terrible thing, we should just continue recognizing Somalia. So it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. And it's also going to be interesting because now the possibility is that Somaliland will join the Abraham Accords. Remember, the Abraham Accords were these breakthroughs that mainstream media hates to talk about, where one after another, more and more Muslim nations recognizing the state of Israel and recognizing its right to exist. That's what the Abraham Accords did, and it's staggering to see it. And now another country will probably do that, that being Somaliland. So interesting developments there. A real hypocrisy, because you see the government of Canada, for instance, has come boldly out, joining other countries, recognizing Palestine, so-called Palestine, as a state. Palestine is not a state. There's no defined borders. They are governed by Hamas, whose written charter says that Jews everywhere should be killed and Israel should be eliminated. And it's huge. It's got people scratching their heads that Canada would recognize a terrorist nation like that, but not recognize Somaliland. So look for ongoing hypocrisy at the international level. Sorry, I can't be more positive about that, but that's indeed what we see happening. Another prediction I'm going to make now is that, talking about Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he's really under the gun. He always has been most of his career, but he's a formidable adversary to anybody who tries to take him out. He has led the nation through some very tough times. He's actually presided over the entrepreneurial breakthrough over this last 2 or 3 decades of Israel becoming the startup nation in the world, especially in the area of cyber. And in spite of that, he's always been under attack. Now he's facing something called Qatar Gate, where I won't get into all the details, you can look it up, but the involvement of officials from Qatar, or Qatar, however you want to pronounce that, back into Israel. He's also, there's an inquiry going now, as was promised, following October 7th, in terms of what happened. How did the IDF, the fabled Israel Defense Forces, probably the toughest in the world, how did it happen? How could it be happen that Israel could have been attacked like that on October 7th? It took so long to respond. And the accusations are that Prime Minister Netanyahu is, in fact, not allowing this to truly be done by a third-party arm's length inquiry board. That's creating huge problems. And along with other issues that he has been facing, he's also now facing a situation where an aide, a supposed close aide in his office, he's in jail for a number of things. And because he's in jail, the interrogating forces have been able to get him to cough up about what he sees, at least, has been going on in the PMO, in the Prime Minister's office. Some pretty historic stuff and horrific stuff. These are allegations. I have no idea if they're true, but I'm just saying it adds to the pressure that Benjamin Netanyahu is under. So is he going to resign? Is he going to be taken down? I'll just say that he's probably closer to that than ever before, but we'll see how it raises out. The other prediction I'm going to make is that Ukraine and Russia will settle this year. And Russia's been pretty stubborn up to date because they've been so strong. But their recent, I'll call it a defeat in the city of Kupiansk, where in fact Ukrainian forces has pretty well pushed them right out. The Russians had taken it over. It's down now to a few enclaves of Russian soldiers huddled in buildings trying to stay alive, and Ukraine doing the push there. Also, there's a significant portion of the fighting forces of Russia, Putin's forces, which are called the Wagner fighters. These, in effect, are mercenary. Now, their leader, of course, as you remember, a little over a year ago, almost 2 years ago now, accidentally fell out of a helicopter at several thousand feet. That people who fall out of favor with President Putin have a way of falling out of helicopters or high buildings, tripping off of balconies. But the Wagner fighters have been pretty ferocious. It seems like they're losing heart also. So watch for that. With that shift now, watch for that to settle. In the culture wars, and we like to end on this, wow, big decisions now facing our friend Travis Kelce from the Kansas City Chiefs. And is he going to retire or not? Just this week in the game against the Broncos, they lost 20-13. So it's the first time since 2014 that the Chiefs have not made it into the playoffs. A lot of questions coming out now. Now, in that particular game, the main quarterback, of course, was out with injuries, and third string quarterback was in and playing. Okay, that's a factor. But in fact, when Travis was leaving the field, we saw him giving the high five to everybody, the crowd cheering wildly, begging him to stay. Some are even saying he might not play in the final game against Las Vegas this Sunday. I'm guessing he's going to play because, he's already attained the second spot in history, highest number of yards for any tight end in history. But the interesting thing, he's actually exactly 10 yards short of the 13,000 mark, 13,000 yards for a tight end. So I'm guessing they're going to let him play in that final game, even though it's kind of not a happy game, just to get him over that 13,000 mark. But we're going to see, and the other thing we're going to see then, what's that going to do to NFL ratings? Not just if the beloved Travis, in fact, steps down, but does that take away, of course, his fiancée, Taylor Swift, who's always been a fixture at the game? And the NFL has noticed and recorded a significant uptick in women viewers, especially young women viewers. And of course, they're attributing that to Taylor Swift's newfound love of football. And now if Travis goes, Taylor herself, even though she's had an absolute stunning record year and is going to have more records coming up, and I say that in terms of records in sales, because she's got a documentary coming out about her tour, she's got a movie coming out, and yet some of the music and some of the things on her recent productions are facing some, as they say, literary criticism, artistic criticism. That seems to be bothering her. So folks, what's going to happen in the world of culture as these two dynamos may be leaving their favored fields of endeavor? We're going to see. And I also made a prediction, and it's come true, and we talked about it a while ago, that in the world of Hollywood, I said, keep watching for the animated film David. It speaks for itself. It's a film by Angel Studios, faith-based film agency. They operate on much smaller budgets, and on a much smaller budget produced the animated film David, which roared to second place just over this last week in terms of engrossing 22 million, and only falling short of Avatar and trouncing our dear friend SpongeBob SquarePants. So watch for this to continue. We to go on. We predicted that this little animated movie about David was going to rock Hollywood. It has, and it shows again that faith-based films are no longer a niche; they're mainstream. So watch for that to continue to go as these small David-like films keep knocking off the big Goliaths. Folks, have a great weekend. See you on Monday. Thanks for tuning in.